Welcome to Moving Forward, conversations on culture, identity, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Linda Anderson, and I created this podcast as a space for real, heartfelt conversations with people who are reflecting, evolving, and boldly stepping into what's next. This podcast was born out of my own journey through seasons of loss, transition, and transformation, and my belief that healing happens when we come together to share our stories. My hope is that these conversations will inspire you to pause, reflect, and find courage as you move forward in your own life. Today's conversation is about creativity, storytelling, community, and the ways our gifts can help people feel connected to learning, to history, and to one another. My guest is Jeff Schinkel, Creative Director for KidScoop, an educational publication that has helped generations of young people engage with reading, creativity, and critical thinking in meaningful and accessible ways. Jeff's career has spanned newspapers, illustration, design, marketing, and educational media, but at the center of his work has always been communication, creativity, and connection. Before joining KidScoop full-time in 2004, Jeff served as a creative services director for the Bay Area News Group in San Francisco, where he developed campaigns and community projects connected with the organizations, including Golden State Warriors, Oakland Athletics, and Las Vegas Raiders. Beyond his professional work, Jeff has remained deeply connected to local history and community through projects with the Washington Township Museum of Local History and his service with Candlelighters. Through illustration and design, he has helped preserve the rich history of the Tri-City area and bring together forgotten stories and places back into public memory. Jeff earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in illustration from the Academy of Art University and has received recognition from the Addy Awards, the International Newspaper Marketing Association, and the National Newspaper Association. In this conversation, we explore how creativity shapes identity, why stories matter across generations, and what it means to move forward while staying connected to community, history, and purpose. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us and for giving up your time to talk to the listeners.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Jeff, when you look back on your life, where do you think your creativity really first began to take shape? And when did you see that creativity as part of your identity?
So when I was a small kid, I went to what would today be called daycare. Back then we called it my babysitter in South San Francisco, a wonderful woman by the name of Marie. My parents both worked full-time at that time. They were sort of the first double income kind of generation. They were just starting. It was still kind of a new thing then. Marie was, she was an artist, and there was always materials there to work with, and she really encouraged that from, the time I was about 1 year old till I was in the end of elementary school. I went there, and she was a huge creative force. She used to make, she was a huge 49er fan before they were any good, and so and Giants. And so she would, for home games, she would make these things to hang in the window, these beautiful illustrations of, beat the Dolphins or whatever, whoever they were playing. And she would, it was really, cool to see those come to life. And she kind of taught me early steps on how to draw. So that's sort of where the creative part, was encouraged. And actually from, I was a huge Disney fan, of course, and loved animation, and where it sort of made sense to me that this could become a career was actually from an episode of the old TV show Bewitched. You remember that the husband on that show was an ad man, And at some point in one of the shows, I remember they were doing a pitch to a client about these little cartoon insects going into a bank. And all of a sudden, for me, the light bulb went on. I said, "Oh my gosh, you can make a living drawing. This is really cool." So early on, I was very interested in getting to advertising. So that was where I thought my future would be.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that too, because I hope the listeners hear how you got this from a woman who, not necessarily from her, but it inspired you, and how you don't realize, I'm sure she does or did realize how the impact she made on you. And listeners, that's what happens is as we move forward in this journey, that's what happens. We make these impacts on people. So my question to you though is, how has creativity helped shape the way you understand yourself and connect with others?
So in terms of connecting with others, it really helped me, especially when I got into middle school and high school. I was pretty outgoing, bordering on class clown from kindergarten through sixth. Then we moved to Fremont, and I was sort of the new kid, and I kind of went into my shell at that point. Became much more introverted, and doing artwork, and that was sort of a way to express myself and say the things that I was afraid to say out loud. And so that's sort of where I went art wise. It helped me kind of find a voice. And also then people sort of would come to me, "Hey, we have the school play is coming up. Will you do a poster for it?" And sort of made that connection with folks. So that's what that was kind of where again, finding my voice was that way.
Yeah. And any listeners that have listened to these podcasts before, finding voice is so important. And again, someone came along your journey and encouraged that voice. So thank you for sharing that too. So, Jeff, as I read in the introduction, you've definitely worked across newspapers, education, design, and community storytelling. When you look at all those experiences, though, together, what thread connects them for you?
Um, Gosh, I think the thing that kind of connects them again is the being able to, telling stories to me is very important. Everybody has a story, as I'm sure you're finding as you do the podcast.
Mhm.
People have this story, and there's different ways to tell a story. Not just verbally, but visually and other ways. And so I think all of those things combined are about telling stories about, whether it be, especially with Kids Scoop, is sort of telling the stories of all these different topics that we cover week after week.
Yeah.
So that I learn a lot from all of those things, and so I do the stuff, I learn the sort of the backstory of all this stuff, and then we try to figure ways to sift it down and make it not too overwhelming. We don't totally cover a topic end to end, but it's a way to kind of make the connection for the young readers to these things.
So the keywords I'm going to pull out, and anyone that knows me that's listening, just voices, and then talking about people's story. So important. And you are obviously a very good listener because in order to do all that and connect all that, you need to be a good listener. And you've developed those skills over many of your professions here. So during your years, though, in the newspapers and media, you worked at a time when communication was rapidly changing. What did that season teach you about people and the importance of storytelling?
Um, yeah, I sort of was trained in college and art school in, mostly traditional media, and graduated just in time for the invention of the Macintosh and desktop publishing. So suddenly the
Mm.
carpet was kind of pulled out from under a lot of what I had learned. But the fundamentals still mattered. It was just the vehicle and the tools were changing. And so I realized immediately I need to sort of adapt quickly and, learn this next thing. And that's sort of been a continuum in my whole career is, I think, okay, I've learned all I need to know. And then the next thing happens, like, oh no, I got to keep learning. So I've learned that, you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to adapt to these changes. And I go through all the stages of grief every time. Why does it have to be? I don't want to learn something else. Eventually you sort of say, okay, that's enough. You've done that. Now it's time to just dig in. And you realize that all these things, right on up to AI, these are tools ultimately.
Yeah.
And as long as you invest the time to see how you can use them best, what they can do to help you tell those stories. It's just important to keep learning. So
Oh, so true. You never stop. And I hope even young listeners that are hearing this is you don't ever stop. You graduate from high school, you graduate from college, you go through your professions, but you can't ever stop learning. And I think especially now with so much that's happening. You eventually found your way to Kid Scoop, which by the way, as a principal, I had at my school and I absolutely love it. But at Kid Scoop, that's where creativity and education come together. What drew you most deeply to that mission?
so when I was with the newspaper, the Argus, Daily Review, that whole group of papers, we did something called Book Bucks,
Mm,
and it was education based. It was once a year, and for a week, kids would get the newspaper in school, and then at the end, they earned book bucks, which they could spend in the community at local businesses that accepted these bucks, and it was just this big event every year in the community. It was Book Bucks Week, and it was my favorite thing. But it was only 1 week a year that I got to do this, and I just looked forward to it year after year. And like most of my career, through dumb luck, Vicky Whiting, who's the founder of Kid Scoop, happened to be at the newspaper and saw the Book Bucks work right at a time when she was looking for another artist, and that's sort of how I fell into Kid Scoop. And so right away, she and I were totally on the same wavelength in terms of what the vision that we had for Kid Scoop, and her as a teacher, and then with my artwork, that it's just been a great relationship all these years, right from the start. And seeing a way to attract reluctant readers, especially by having puzzles and games and things mixed in amongst some more reading, a little bit more in-depth reading and math skills and science, making it fun. So it was really easy for me because it put me back in touch with when I was a kid. We had something called my weekly reader, which I always look forward to. It was a really cool thing every week. I even found in a scrapbook a copy of one from way back. And you can see, oh, okay, that was what planted the seed. Is you saw this something that the kids got that was a little break from the routine, and but educational, and that Kid Scoop fit very much in that mold.
Your story is a great story. I have more questions, but I just have to say that because doors opened for you and you went through them, and look where it's taken you. It's a great story. I'm very thankful you're on here because I'm learning a lot also from you. So, Jeff, we're in a time period now of things changing big in
Mhm.
many different ways, and young people growing up. But from your point of view and your journey, which is an awesome one, what do you think young people need most today in order to stay curious, creative, and connected?
Um, I would say they need two things in abundance that they may not be getting now. Number one is unstructured free playtime, to just be kids and create their own worlds and socialize. Um, all the structured stuff has its place, but there's no replacing that. I think it was Mr. Rogers, play is the work of a child, right? And I very much believe that. The other thing is art, the arts, humanities. Those are always the first things on the chopping block often. Um, be,
True.
because it's hard to quantify the value. There's a lot of talk about STEM. There's also STEAM, which I prefer, obviously, the A being for art. And if you look at traditional STEM things, there is art as much as science in there. And if kids don't have the opportunity to really, delve into the arts and find that creative voice, I think they're lacking something as they grow up. both in their career and also personal for personal development. Kids are so creative. Left to it, they can be very creative, funny, all of that. But sometimes we want to sort of box them in, and adults have a path in mind, and we want them to go down this particular path. And I would encourage folks to not choose the path so much for them. Give them the opportunity to create and play.
Thank you so much for that. It's such an it's that right now the buzzword is purposeful play.
Yeah.
Let them play, and you can, as a teacher or whatever watching, you can give feedback on purposeful play. And I thank you so much for saying that,
No.
because it is very critical. So, one part of your story that really stands out to me is your work helping preserve the history of the Tri City, which, for the listeners, that's Fremont, Newark, and Union City in the Bay Area in California. You're helping preserve the history of the Tri City area through illustration and design. What inspired you to do that work for you personally?
Well, I was asked to do that by the Washington Township Museum of Local History, and I learned so much. Again, one of the benefits. So I will just say that through the years I've tried to come up with what is it you do? You say cartoonist or graphic artist. Oh, do you do a comic strip? No. Do you do animation? No. You go down the list of things, and so I come up with the term educational cartoonist, whatever that means. But that's sort of what I see it. And so doing that work, the history work fell right into that. I learn a lot doing these things and being able to make that connection locally. I've been here since 1972.
Mm.
And I learned a lot about the history of this area there was a mapping project, and then there was also a coloring book of women who made history in this area, and both those things were just huge eye openers for me. I think it's really important for people to appreciate and know, how we got, how our area got to where it is. What's the history behind that shaped it? Because it's inspiring, I think, for young ones to see. These were ordinary people that did, ultimately really important things that helped shape the community,
Yeah.
and all of them can do that.
And history is so critical. It's part of, that's how you move forward. You think about history and then you move forward. And I know we're talking about in the Bay Area, but history across the U.S., wherever your community is. So, Jeff, on that note, though, too, so through your projects with the Washington Township Museum of Local History and your involvement with the Candlelighters and also Niles Rotary, which is where I met you, you've remained deeply connected to the community. Why has giving back remained important throughout your life?
So for me, it's a kind of therapy.
Mm,
It's helped me. I've dealt with, myself, I've dealt with anxiety and
mm,
depression at times. And for me, I get so much more back than I give. You hear people say that, but it's honestly true.
mhm,
For one example, we did a Niles Rotary project where we raised funds to give Chromebooks out to a few schools.
mhm.
And it was this year, in fact, my grandson came home and he was so excited. He said, my computer at school has Niles Rotary sticker on it.
Aw.
So, we did this project. I had no thought of, my own family benefiting from it. And yet, you're trying to do something to give out, and it still comes back to you in that way. And just in general, you get a lot out of it. I do anyway. I think, people who are having, feeling down, and, I always looked at it like, I can help somebody else. Uh, and it lifted me up too, doing that. So
Mhm.
that's why it's been important to me. So,
And what you feel when you're serving. I mean, it's so important. Can I tell you those Chromebooks? Because it happened during COVID.
right.
And the reason I know that is we were one of the schools when I was the principal that received them. So thank you for sharing that, because
We
I
did
do
the
remember that. And thank you, Niles Rotary.
we did
Um,
the unboxing at Olivera, in fact. So yeah,
say that again.
we did the unboxing of the Chromebooks at Olivera.
Right.
So yeah,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I do remember that. So thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
again, back to service. Service, you get so much out of serving, and you do feel empowered and knowing that you're helping others. And look how it came back to you
Mhm.
also.
Yeah.
Great story on there. So when people lose connection to local history or even shared stories, what do you think communities lose as well?
Oh, it's huge loss. Losing that connection. These are stories. It's, story is in the word history, and it is stories. It's a whole foundation of a community. It doesn't mean a community needs to be, kind of frozen in amber and can never change. But it's helpful to change with understanding, at least, appreciating the history and preserving what should be preserved and adapting what needs to be changed. So I think you can lose a lot by just sort of changing for change's sake. I guess you can lose a lot.
Right. And we say the local history, but I say shared stories too, because children love to hear that. We don't think they do. They love to hear stories. And our stories go back to history, and theirs will too.
Mhm.
And it goes back to what you're saying about, unstructured time. Let them talk, let them hear your voice. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. Jeff, this podcast, it centers around culture, identity, healing, and hope. Where have you seen creativity become a source of healing, connection? You shared a little bit about that, or understanding, either personally or in the lives of others.
Um, well, personally, as I shared, it's helped me a lot dealing with depression and anxiety. It makes me feel grounded. It gives me a purpose forward. Um, I've seen it a lot in when I go and visit a classroom. To see that
Yeah.
confidence boost up when children are drawing and either they're following along with something I've drawn and it becomes their own. It doesn't look like mine, which I'm always excited about. And I always point out that if we drew a picture of a shark or something like that, notice how everybody's is different, just like our handwriting is different, and it's your own thing, and you can sort of see them, the light go on for them a little bit that, oh, I was being creative here, and so I see that a lot.
And I'm sure you're one of the people that come in the classrooms or wherever that don't put people down or the child or whoever. Oh, no, that's not right. You
No,
know,
no.
yeah, because that'll squash it and
uh,
that's it. And I know you're, like, as I'm listening to you, definitely not that. So thank you. So looking back now, what are you most proud of? Not necessarily professionally, but even personally.
hmm. um Honestly, I think that my family and the volunteering,
Yes.
honestly, are the things, I'm proud of a lot in my career, but uh, volunteer time is really important to me, and seeing the where the rubber meets the road with helping people in the community, seeing the difference that a little bit of effort can make, especially when there's a whole bunch of people come out, and the more many hands make light work, and so when a whole bunch of folks show up for a project, the transformation can be huge. And so to be a little small part of that in Candlelighters or Kid Scoop or Rotary, that's always a great thing.
Yeah. The topic again of this podcast is moving forward, but then there's the conversations and you're hitting with your own life of, culture, identity, sharing your identity, the healing part of being, an artist, and that helps, or serving rather. So, but Jeff, if someone listening today feels disconnected from their own creativity, their community, or even their sense of purpose, what would you want them to remember as they move forward?
Well, the first thing I would say is having this is the hardest thing to do,
Mm.
is to ask for some help from a friend, from a loved one, from a professional, whatever it takes, because you'll find quickly that you are valued. People want to help you. From a creative standpoint, I find that kids are very creative, and consider themselves artists till around third or fourth grade.
Hmm.
And then humans tend to separate themselves and they start believing things like, oh, they're good at art because they were gifted. They're just naturally good at it. It all comes easy to them. They don't really, and so they sort of stop. They don't do it. And I run into people all the time who say, "Oh, I can't draw a straight line." I always counter with, "You can sign your name, yes, and then your name is nothing but lines and curves and dots and squiggles, so you can draw because you're drawing your name, and then it's just a matter of having them just start doing it." It uses parts of the brain and emotions that nothing else quite does. Any kind of arts, whether singing, dancing, visual arts, so important, and people tend to shy away from it. And I say, do it. Don't worry about hanging it in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Just do it yourself. The process itself has a tremendous value. The outcome almost doesn't matter. It's the doing it that really is where the benefit is, and it can lift your mood. It can make you mad. It can do all kinds of stuff, but that's what creativity is.
Yeah. Oh, Jeff, I have one final question, although I hate this to end because I'm hearing so much from you that I didn't know. So I appreciate you sharing all this. But Jeff, at this stage of your life, what does moving forward mean to you now?
Um, Pretty much like when I first got out of college, it's to kind of keep learning things. And, the changes are the pace of change is really, really fast, which in a way nobody can keep up with, which is okay because if you miss the first change, you can pick it up on the second time around. But yeah, really just to sort of keep as relevant as I can continue to be, whatever form that takes going forward. I don't see myself stopping, doing artwork, even if it's just for myself someday. That's okay. It's still, there's still a process there that I appreciate, and learning the cool new tools is kind of neat too. So,
Jeff, again, thank you so much for sharing your story and reflections with us today. What stands out in this conversation to me is the reminder that creativity can shape identity, it can preserve history and build bridges across generations. Through your work, you've shown how storytelling and design can help people stay connected to learning, to community, and to one another. I'm so grateful again for your time, your perspective, and the care you brought to your work and continue to bring to your work over the years. Again, thank you so much for joining me on Moving Forward.